everybody. If you not know me, my name is Ben Hansen. I've been going to this church for a long time. Just finished my sophomore year in college. And I have been this last semester, the reason why I'm talking. I took part in a group called Harding University in Greece. And I go to Harding University College in Arkansas. But they have this special offer where you can go and study abroad for a semester. They have all these places, so I chose to go to Greece. And I really haven't liked being back home too much. I love seeing everyone. It's nice and all. But there's one thing that's really gotten under my skin more than anything else. And it's when people ask me the question, hey, how was your trip? Because that's really not a fair question at all to ask. And I'm tired of hearing it. Because frankly, if I'm going to answer this question, I'm going to need a lot of time. And when I start to talk about it, I know from experience people would just walk away. And they give all these excuses like exams and but I need a set amount of time where everyone can just come in a room and I can, make a PowerPoint and we can all sit down and just listen to what I have to say. It's a silly thought, but this happens to be that day. My purpose for asking to speak tonight is really not to give you a bunch of pictures of my trip. I could talk about Cyprus, I could talk about caves, sunsets, all kinds of things that are a lot of fun, and they were a lot of fun, and I'll have great stories to tell for a long time, but that's really not the purpose I have in talking today. I'm not really here to talk about my semester-long vacation, which is what it was, but a lot of things happened that I really feel that need to be shared. I have a lot of stories that I'm very excited to tell, mainly about what this trip did to my faith. And I'm going to kind of go piece by piece. There's not really like a full timeline I could follow, so I'm going to kind of jump around to areas and people, so just bear with me. The first thing I want to talk about is we spent the majority of the semester studying Paul and Paul's journeys throughout wherever he went, wherever the Holy Spirit led him, which was basically wherever a person could go at the time. And he followed, and he was never one to stand down from a challenge. And he did all of it in the name of Christ. It was incredible. I really can, I feel for Paul now that we've studied him so well, and I really like him a lot more. Because one thing that he did that I don't really know why a lot of people don't do this. I mean, I understand it's very scary, and I don't do it either. But he kept on testing the boundaries of God's faithfulness. And he kept pushing further and further and further and further until he finally reached as far as he could go, which God was still faithful, and Paul couldn't go any further, but God's faithfulness spread past him. And he learned for sure that everything God does is good. And he learned that in a lot of different places. And every time Paul boldly declared his faith, God showed him to be faithful, always. There was never a time where Paul was let down. And Paul states his life goal in Philippians 3 when he says, I want to know Christ. And he really, really, really did everything to prove that he wanted to know Christ. And that's a great goal to have, right? Paul also proves that is a very dangerous goal to have. But no matter what kind of danger Paul got into, God always has back. So I first want to look at Paul's journey to Philippi. Goes into a town, he preaches the gospel. Does it everywhere he goes. He'll talk to whoever will listen about Jesus and the message and the great news. And, as usual, a mob forms and takes him to whatever leaders. This is not really anything new for Paul, so I'm sure as he's getting carried on someone's back, he's still talking about Jesus. And so he gets set down in front, and in Philippi, he could have gotten thrown in jail, he could have gotten run out of town, he could have gotten executed, maybe if the mob got wild enough. But in Philippi, they say, we're going to beat you. And that's the sentencing Paul gets. But no worries, right? Paul is a Roman citizen, and since Philippi falls under Rome, a Roman citizen cannot be beaten. So, good news for Paul, right? Sentenced to be beaten, but he's a Roman citizen, so he's not legally allowed to be beaten. But that's not what happened. Paul took the beating and ended up going to jail. Did Paul just somehow forget he was a Roman citizen? Because if he had said, hey, I'm a Roman citizen, I can prove it, he could have proved it and he wouldn't have had to have a beating. I feel like that would be ideal in that situation, to not have a beating. Did he forget the law and what it was about? No, Paul was about to face something pretty serious. I mean, not too many of us enjoy being beaten, but whatever happened here, it had to be God. God's fingerprints are all over it. I really don't know how this conversation went down where, God came up to Paul and he said, "Now, Paul, yes, God, I'm going to need you to not claim your Roman citizenship in Philippi just this one time, so if you could do that, that would be great." I really don't know how that conversation went, but however it went, Paul got the message and he didn't claim his Roman citizenship. So he gets beaten for it and he gets thrown in jail. But talking to the people around Philippi, it's still an area where Christianity is alive. It's very nice to see. They say that because Paul took that beating, Paul won a church. That's what they say. They say since Paul stood up and did this thing that it was not Paul's idea to take the beating, I can promise you that, God told Paul, don't, just trust me. I know by not saying you're a Roman citizen, I'm taking this out of your hands, but do it anyway. Trust me. And Paul follows God wherever God leads. And Paul won a church, and not only that, but someone else took the message from Philippi and started a church somewhere else, so Paul won 2 churches. And, I mean, it's just because Paul had a trust in God that is incredible. Another story happened in Athens, which I was in Athens, Greece for 3 months out of the semester, so that is kind of is familiar to me. Paul stands up and, he's told to go to Athens. And what you need to know about Athens at this time is that this is a college town, and like half the town is college kids, and all of the brilliant minds of the day are there. So if you're going to go out and teach a religious message, Athens is the place to go, because that's where the big boys live. So Paul, he goes to Athens, and he starts teaching synagogue to God-fearers, to whoever will listen, and Paul's message is rejected. That's very disappointing, because this is one of the centers of religion and philosophy, and for that message to be rejected here at such an important place, that's disappointing. But not only was he rejected, the Bible says that the people sneered at him, so he was essentially laughed out of town for coming and declaring this message that the Holy Spirit led him to bring. This is one time where it's kind of hard to think, why did he have to go do this? But anyway, Paul trusts God, and good things continue to happen throughout his life, and people still hear the gospel. One experience we had in Athens was that we went to a soup kitchen. Here you can see with some kids. And the group that was eating at the soup kitchen at the time is mainly Afghanistan people who are now refugees for a lot of reasons. And I was going into this, I'm ready to speak about Jesus all day, getting myself really pumped up, going to reach the lost today. I have this opportunity, all these people sitting here that really need to hear this, and a tough point in their life, and I'm really ready to do this. I'm ready to go in there and talk to a bush about, the vine and the branches, boom, that connects to your life. I'm really excited about this. But, when we get downstairs and we start talking to the kids, the first conversation I had with someone, he said, "Oh, I love God." And I was like, "Oh, praise God." Going to the next table, and it's a group of teenagers. And now my major is Bible, and I'll probably start in youth ministry somewhere. So I see a group of teenagers, and I'm like, hey, I can connect with them. I mean, I was a teenager, 1 year ago? So I'm thinking, wow, teenagers, I know what teenagers love. We love music. We love getting in shenanigans. I'm ready to relate to these people and, talk to them about Jesus. And I get up to the table, and the conversation goes, "Hi, hello." And I say, "How old are you?" And they said 17. I said, "Oh, cool, I'm 20. And I said, "Where are you from?" And they said Afghanistan. And they asked where I was from, and I said the United States of America. And that's kind of when I just froze, and everything stopped. And I'm not usually one that moments take my breath away, or however you want to put it, but this was a moment that absolutely stunned me, put me on the floor. I had no idea what to say. The first thing that ran through my mind was, oh man, I should be apologizing right now. This is really, really bad. I have lived a life that's so rich, fulfilling, I have a house to stay in. In fact, so many people have opened their houses to me all over across the world now that like I could go pretty much anywhere and be safe. And I've always had food on the table. And these are just kids, and they're younger than me. They don't even have a place to live. They haven't ever been home. I don't even know if they've been home. There's a lot of problems with paperwork for the refugees, and they need their paperwork to prove that they're a citizen of whatever country they're from. And if someone loses their papers, they're really hard to get back. And for however long they lose their papers, they may never get them back. They just aren't legally a person anymore. And so that opens them up for violence from whatever government they're currently under. Greece especially wanted to kick all the refugees out of the country because they blame them for the economic troubles. It's just a horrible, horrible scenario. But so all these thoughts are running through my mind, and I'm like, I need to apologize for them having like such a different life than I've lived. Like I've lived a life that's full of just like plentiful stuff, but they just don't have the same thing. And all these thoughts are running through my mind, and I'm just stuck. And then all of a sudden, my time's up. Like that was my few minutes I had to talk to these people. And that really shocked me for a while because I didn't really know. Like this really confused me. Like how do I define a believer now? How do I define a Christian now? Obviously I'd start with, well, how does God love me? And I'd say, oh, that's easy. My family, my friends, having a house, a hearting, I have a lot of things. But then I look at these kids and I say, they don't have these things. They've never had these things. Now how do you define how God loves you? And what I missed at that moment was that obviously it's the cross. It's not anything that we have, it's the cross. And the great thing about that is that's universal, that spreads to everyone. That's how I should have connected with them, but in that moment I was completely lost and had no words. That's the common ground that I failed to see. The common ground wasn't that we were both young. We all like shenanigans. The common ground was the cross. And that's what I failed to see. Moving on to another trip that we took, we went to Israel. We spent 10 days in Israel, traveling across, and it was a very, very interesting trip. It was a lot of fun at times, but I wouldn't describe it as a fun trip. But it was definitely needed. It opened my eyes to a lot of things that were happening, just all over, in general, religion about the world. Like you can go in Jerusalem and every door you open is a new world. It really is. You can walk for 5 minutes through Old Jerusalem, and you can pass through 30 different countries' territories in 5 minutes. It's incredible. You open up a door, and it's Orthodox church. You open up the next door, and it's a mosque. You open up the next. It's all the religions just blended one together. And believe me when I say that people there are tired of seeing all the religions just constantly duke it out with each other. And Israel really doesn't need any more religion. It just needs Jesus. Our guy, his name was Yossi, and one thing he said was, culture is like a knife. It can kill you, or it can cut a birthday cake. And that's very true, especially when speaking about Israel. One thing that really drew me the most was the relics that were all around in churches. And they started out as super awesome, great ideas. If people can't read, how do I tell them the gospel? Well, I make a picture, and now they can follow along, and they can just see the gospel through that. And that's a great idea. But somewhere all that got lost, and now entire religions are based off of worshiping that picture that was drawn. And they completely, totally miss the purpose of the picture. And it just leads to a lot of confusion, and it really just made all of us sick to our stomachs to see. And another thing Yossi told us was, this is your home, whether you like it or not. And in Jerusalem, that's very, very true. This is where Christianity really began. Some say it began on the road to Emmaus when Cleopas walked with Jesus in sorrow, because Cleopas was following Christ, and he gets all the way to Jerusalem, and Christ is crucified. And he's walking back home on the road to Emmaus, and he's thinking to himself, like, wow, I really thought this was the guy. I thought this was the Messiah. I really did. But it just wasn't. And as he's walking, Jesus joins them, but he doesn't know it's Jesus at the time. And they talk for a while, and he's like, wow, this guy's smart. And they get to the house, and then right when the light turns on, he says, oh, that's what it is. Jesus is gone. And so he takes that message, and he runs back down that road to Jerusalem. So people say the road to Emmaus is the road to faith because of that first testimony that was given. And a really cool thing about the road to Emmaus, see me up here with the flower. It's a very cute picture. But the best thing about it is this is near the road to Emmaus. But the road to Emmaus is just a little path. A lot of things in Israel are bigger than life. They're really not near as big as they want them to seem. So the road to Emmaus is a little path that like two people could walk on at a time. And it's a dirt path. And it used to be a huge road, but now it's just kind of there. And flowers grow all along that road. And that is God just showing off through his creation, saying, hey, this is the road to faith. And it's still blooming. It's still growing. And flowers are sprouting up everywhere. It's incredible. Another thing about Israel was we went to all these sites. And you're saying, wow, I'm going to be really spiritually revived going here, right? So we get to see where Christ was crucified. We get to see where Christ was resurrected. Those are all great ideas, but really, those sites just really aren't serving the purpose that they used to serve. I couldn't really find God in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I couldn't find God in the Garden Tomb. All of us in our group were thinking, we'd be spiritually revived, but here we were just sitting here empty after our trip and wondering what in the world is going on. And the more and more we talked about it, the more and more we realized that, because of the cross and because of our baptisms, we needed to stop looking in all of these places for God and look inside of each of us, because that's where God's dwelling. Because after all of these just momentous events happened, God made his dwelling inside of us and not in any of these places. And it's really sad to see so many religions in Israel pick up those sites and build churches there and just run with it and just making money and trying to get their stock up and get as many people to come to a church as possible and respect it and kneel everywhere and kiss all the stars on the ground. It really was just absolutely draining to see that, which is just talking about the religion that's everywhere overseas, and it's just overwhelming. It really is. It just takes the life right out of you, especially Israel. We were in Jerusalem for 4 days, and at the end of our trip to Jerusalem, after 4 days, we're all sitting there thinking, I don't know what to believe anymore, because it was just so draining. There was no love. It was all just hate. It was people fighting back and forth, and we just met so many people that were looking for God the same way that we do, but couldn't find him because of all of the smokes and mirrors and all the relics and all the ceremonies that religion had put in the way. And one of those people that we met was Yossi, and Yossi was our guide through Israel. Yossi is incredible. Very, very, very smart man. Probably knows more about the Bible than almost anyone I know. It got to the point where it was kind of embarrassing when he started asking biblical questions, because our group of a few Bible majors were all just kind of sitting here looking at each other what did he just say? And he's like, you don't know the answer? And we're like, we don't even know what the question means. But it was embarrassing because, in truth, Yossi says he's not a believer. He knows almost all of the Bible. He says he's believed every word he's ever read the Bible, but his heart just will not allow him to find the love of God. And after Jerusalem, I completely and totally understand that. It makes sense for me, because I had seen that happen to me for a few days. I'd seen it happen to other people in our group. We'd all talked about it. It was really hard to see. And in fact, there's so many Muslims, Jews, and Christians just kind of openly praying for the destruction of their rival religion just in the town. There's no love there. It's really hard to find love in religions that are praying for that. And we had trouble finding love in all of Jerusalem. But once we kind of stepped back for a little while and looked back at the situation, we could find love in bits and pieces. And that's what I've told Yossi. I said, Yossi, I saw you love on the 6-year-old that went on the trip with us. I saw that happen. And that was you. That was the love of God pouring out of you. And I told him, I'll pray for you every day until my prayer of petition becomes a prayer of thanksgiving. I will pray for you every day until your heart can find God. And I please pray that prayer with me every day. But until that day happens, I'll keep praying for Yossi. Another thing about just general religion, to get like an overview of what a lot of people think about religion in Israel, we went to a Jewish Orthodox neighborhood. And it's an interesting place. It looks just like a normal city, except there's a lot of different customs, and the people do different stuff there. One thing that really stuck out was that if you're a pretty woman, that is what they call the kiss of death. Like you're blacklisted. You're gone. They kick you out of the community if you're pretty, which that doesn't really make much sense to me, but it does to them. And in fact, it makes so much sense that a lot of girls get scared of being ostracized from what they know and from these people. And so to avoid being ostracized, these women will take just scalding hot things and just distort their faces so that they'll be re-accepted by the communities that they live in. And it's very sad to see. And even more sad than that is that when a lot of people around in Europe and in Israel, when they look at religion, that's what they see. They don't see love anywhere. They see the fighting going back and forth. They see that happen in Jewish Orthodox neighborhood. That's what they see religion as. And so when you start saying, oh, well, Jesus, they say, no, I'm not interested. It's very sad to see. But since we're on a sad note right now, I'd love to talk about a very, very happy note. This man's name is Osman. He is our guide for our Egypt trip. We went to Egypt for 10 days as well. And that was a lot more fun of a trip. And Osman, a lot of things I have to say about him. So we've been to Israel, and now we come to Egypt, not really knowing what to expect. While we're over there, apparently there's some unrest somewhere. Don't really know. I don't think we were there. We never saw anything. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors from the media. So we're just kind of having a ball in Egypt. We're traveling all over the place. We follow the path of the Exodus. We do all kinds of great things. And Osman leads us the whole way. And the really cool thing about Osman is that he's the closest person to like Christ in the flesh that I've ever met in my life. And he will forever be one of the most impactful people I've ever met. And I was only with him for 9 days. He truly lives love that like has no bounds whatsoever. And it's awesome. People just have to be around him. And his spirit is it's just addicting. And people are just attracted to him. And I really just feel like I have to spend time around him. Because he just has the Spirit of God just flowing out of him. And the sad part about that is he lives in Egypt, and it's what he calls my Egypt. He will not leave his home. He will stay with his people. He will stay with his community. And so I may never see him again until heaven, but that's a good thought too. In fact, he's one of 5 Egyptologists, which is a real thing, which is a really cool title to have too. But he lives in this tiny apartment on the 6th floor in a big building in a high-rise in Cairo, which is a town of 20 million people. It's ridiculous. Yet he owns a huge house in the nicest neighborhood in all of Cairo. He just refuses to leave his home. He refuses to leave that community. All these people that he loves so hard, he just cannot leave them. He just loves Egypt. And no matter if the grass is greener on the other side, he will stay with Egypt because, as he says, this is my Egypt. And that's very cool in itself. And so, as I said, he was our guide for Egypt. But another really interesting thing about him is like people around Egypt know Osman as the gift giver. And if you work with Osman, the first day in the office, he'll walk up to you and he'll say, "Are you a watch or sunglasses person?" And then however you answer, the next day you walk in on your desk, there's a new watch or a pair of sunglasses. And that's just because that's who Osman is. He continues to give and give and give, and he adopts everyone that comes around. I remember like the 5th or 6th day on the trip, and we were in his house, and he's like, "Well, son, what's your name?" And I was like, "Osman, you know my name, it's Ben." He's like, "Ben Osman. I like the sound of that." And it was always so great to just hear him, and he had this huge smile that was really addicting, and he kept giving us gifts. And if we looked tired, he would be like, "You guys want some ice cream?" And we'd all be like, "Yeah, I like ice cream." So he'd stop at a store and get ice cream. And if we ever walked into a shop, he'd be like, "All right, hold on. You guys look around, I'll go get Coke." He comes back with a whole jug of Coke. He kept on buying us gifts. He'd see a little boy selling scarves, and he'd be like, how many scarves do you have? Give me all those. All right, here's some money. And he'd just hand out scarves to people just because he cared about Egypt and because he wanted their economy to flourish. So he would do whatever he could in his power to make sure that happened. But the thing that we really didn't know was that all these gifts kept coming out of his own money. This was out of pocket. This was not like travel expenses we paid for. Like if Osmond was buying us ice cream, Osmond was paying for the ice cream. And not many of us knew that until at the very end of the trip. And if we had known, we'd all be like, oh no, Osmond, don't give us ice cream. But since we didn't, of course, we're like, great ice cream. But the best part about Osmond is that he's a Christian. And he's a really strong Christian living in a very Muslim land. And he told us a story of how he came to Christ years ago. And it's a story that we can all relate to because, well, not we all, but me all. He first really believed one night on a cruise ship heading down the Nile River as he listened to a Harding group sing songs of praise. Now I can relate to that because he told us that when we were a Harding group on a cruise ship sailing down the Nile River. And he told us this story just in tears, and you look around, everyone's just crying because, I mean, it's such a beautiful story. And he loves to hear us sing. It fuels him spiritually, which is awesome. But sadly, you know, a lot of unrest in Egypt, like I said. USA Today says Egypt's more dangerous to go to than Palestine now. Harding's probably not going to get to go to Egypt for a while, which is sad because Osmond, our group was the first group to go in 3 semesters. So Osmond had gone a year without seeing a Harding group and hearing them sing. And he said it just broke his heart, which is really sad. But it's also incredible, just the gift of song. His wife, her name is Aliki, and one night we went to their house and they fed us a ton of food, which was great because in Egypt we can't drink the water, we can't eat anything that's been touched by their water, so there's very, very little things you can eat. It's pretty much only bread. But we went to Aliki and Osmond's house and they fed us so well and took care of us. And Aliki, she hears that my group of about 6 people, we had decided to have our 4-day spring break in Cyprus because we just wanted to go off the map and go somewhere no one's ever been before. So we just kind of picked Cyprus, and there it was. It's really cool we get to do that. But so we picked Cyprus, and we told Osmond that. He's like, oh, you should talk to Aliki. She has a lot of information for you. So we said, all right. We go over and we talk to Aliki. Her whole family lives in Cyprus. And they own their little own diner, and she said, you go talk with them, they'll feed you, they'll house you, they will give you whatever you need. You call this man, he's my brother, he will be your tour guide for Cyprus. And we're all just sitting here like, whoa, what do we do to deserve all these gifts? Like, this family just keeps pouring it on, and we have done absolutely nothing to deserve these gifts, which, I mean, I guess that makes sense because they're gifts, you can't earn them. So we're sitting in Osmond's house, and we're doing whatever we can to give back. And what we do is we sing. And we sat in his living room on the 6th floor in high rise in Cairo and just sang for over an hour. And it was amazing because that singing is just not something that his family gets to hear a lot. And it really, really touches all of their hearts. And in fact, no one really wanted to leave that night, even though it was almost midnight. And we had a very early wake-up call. And it was an hour drive back to the hotel. I mean, Osmond was offering for us to just sleep on his tiny living room apartment, all 39 of us, which wasn't going to happen, but I mean, it was worth a try. But here's the story that makes Osmond forever, forever memorable in my heart. Now, Osmond is quite the jokester, which I can relate to. I pull some pretty good pranks, believe it or not. But Osmond, when he would always say, okay, we will be there in 1 hour. And so one time he said, we'll be at the cruise ship in an hour. And I was like, great. A lot of people were like, oh, time to take a nap. I'm putting on my headphones, and I'm turning on the noise canceling, and I'm about to have just a big music session. I'm just about to listen to some music. It's going to be great. So I get my headphones out of their case, I put them on, turn on the little microphone, and like I picked the perfect song, and 5 seconds into the song, Osmond says, we're here. And everyone's like waking up angry and wondering like what's going on. He's like, oh, I said an hour. I'm in an hour in Egyptian time. You just don't really know which way it's going to go. And so and we all just leave the bus angry. And of course, Osmond's up front laughing his head off. Another thing that he did was really funny. We're waiting for our train to come, for a night train to Cairo, and it was late. It was really late. It was 11:30. We hadn't had dinner, so Osmond's like, "Here, let me buy you some chips." Just goes over to a vendor, wipes out all his chips, and brings them over. And Osmond eats. He's like, "Oh, I've never had these before." Opens the bag, eats one chip, and he's like, "That is the worst taste I've ever had, ever." And we're all just sitting there kind of giggling or whatever. But of course, to Osmond, the worst taste he's ever had, that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. So of course, Osmond calls over his friend. He says, Timo, come here. And so our other guy, Timo, comes over. Osmond's like, "You got to try this chip." And so Timo's like, smiling. "All right, sounds great." Reaches in the bag, is still smiling, takes 2 bites, and his face just turns. It is awful. And it was really funny because, Osmond was dying. He was like cramped over, laughing his head off. And Timo is like spitting in the corner. And that's just kind of the guy Osmond was. He loves to joke around. He's really good at it, which brings us to this story. We needed to get back on the cruise ship fast because we had spent a long time in a temple. And so to get us on the cruise ship fast, Osmond tells us, "Okay, first person on the cruise ship gets free papyrus." Now, papyrus is the paper, the Egyptian paper. It's really cool, but it's also expensive. But if you're offered free papyrus, that's not really going to happen every day in Egypt. So I'm like, free papyrus? Oh, he's kidding. But no, Osmond says, no, really, first person back on the boat gets free papyrus. And so I'm starting to think, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And then he says it again, and he says it again. And at this point, he's gotten 3 of us hooked, and we're all like, okay. So Osmond says, "You ready? Set, go." And we take off running down this street with vendors trying to sell us whatever, €1, €1. And as we sprint by them, we really picked up some steam. Because I noticed the people on the side of the road are like, "Oh yes, go, go." As we sprint down this road, and we get to where the cruise ship is, and if there's this little gangway to walk up onto the cruise boat, and we've been pushing each other the whole way there. So papyrus, it's a big deal. And one of our friends cuts off and takes a shortcut this way, and he's coming up this way while I'm going straight down the gangway, so I have the whole shot. However, as I'm running here, he comes, and to slow his momentum, he just bumps off my hip, and I fall over the side. And as I'm falling, my head's first, so I'm just grabbing whatever I can. So I grab something behind me, it turned out to be a rope, and I'm hanging on for dear life, and then the rope snapped something, and the pole broke, and I fell a couple feet. It wasn't a big deal. I had a little tiny rope burn, maybe bumped my head, maybe not. I was fine, it's miraculous, but the problem was the pole broke. Overseas, usually they'll be like, "Okay, it's fine, it's whatever." I'd broken other things before. I don't know, believe it or not. So it was fine. The only problem is Osmond gets back and hears the story, and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm like, "For what, Osmond?" He's like, "You're hurt." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm perfectly fine. I've had worse injuries brushing my teeth." And Osmond's like, no, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. I'm like, "Osmond, it's perfectly fine. I'm all good. We're all healthy. Let's go see more of Egypt." He's like, "No, I'm very sorry." I'm like, "Okay." He says, "I will give you the papyrus." I was like, "Oh, very, very kind of you, Osmond." And at this point, we're 4 days into the trip, which means it's been 4 days full of just gifts. And so I'm tired of getting gifts from Osmond. I'm saying, "All right, Osmond, I'm really not that special. I know you love us and all, but there are other people out here that deserve some gifts. So you save your gifts and give them to those people." And so a week later, we go to the papyrus shop. This is my little prank to get back at Osmond for all the pranks he's pulled on us. And my little prank is Osmond, he realizes, "Oh, I promised someone papyrus. Oh, who was it?" And I'm sitting in the back corner just kind of snarling, laughing. And he goes through and asks everyone, he's like, "Did I promise you papyrus?" Everyone's like, maybe. Because they want papyrus, but it wasn't them. And he comes to me, and I remember saying, "No, that wasn't me. I almost remembered. I remember who it is. I don't remember who it is. I'm sorry." And Then he walks off, frantically looking for the next person. I'm just kind of sitting there laughing. Finally, I got Osmond. But then, they show us how papyrus is made. It's a very, very cool process. It takes a while. And they show us all kinds of art from ancient Egypt that has survived. And this is the first picture that used color and all this great stuff. And we're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And they show us all these biblical scenes. And there's one, and it's Moses leading his people out of the Red Sea. Which I love Moses now. We'll get to that later. But it's this really cool, huge papyrus. The best part about it is that it's glow in the dark. And this is some serious technology, because it's only been going on papyrus for 5 years. However long they've used papyrus, 5 years of glow in the dark. Anyway, so I'm looking at this, and I'm like, this is a really cool little painting right here. I would love to have this. But, it's way, way, way out of my price range. I still have a lot of trip left. I have to do 2 weeks of free travel. I really can't afford it. And so I just kind of stand in front of the painting, and I'm like, I'll just soak it up for as long as I can. And so I stand there, and it takes, an hour for people to go through, and I've been standing in front of the painting for about 30 minutes. And their associate keeps coming up to me saying, hey, 20% off, and I'm like, oh, no, sorry. 30% off, oh, no, sorry. And then I'm standing there, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have a lot of art. I have posters and such, but I think I need some art, because that makes people fancy and such. And so I decide, you know what, this is a really cool, and this can have sentiment now, how much I love the story of Moses. This is great, and it's going in the dark, so people will love this. And so I decide, hey, you know what, I'll buy this. And so I go to Osmond, because he said, come through me, I'll deal with these people. And I'm like, hey, Osmond, what's the price for this going to be? He says, hold on one moment. Goes, types in the calculator for a while, comes back, and he gives me the price, and I'm sitting here thinking, wow, that's 47% off. That's almost half off. And he's like, oh, well, on top of that, I'll throw in another papyrus. I was like, wow, done, deal, thanks, Osmond. I was like, thanks for, really working them down. He's like, oh, absolutely, no problem, don't think about it. And then we get on the bus, and we found out that Osmond is one of the store owners. And so I think Osmond is cutting me a deal with whoever. No, Osmond takes his own cut out of it. He takes the store's cut out of it, and he makes it so that they make no profit whatsoever. And then he throws in the free papyrus with it. He just wants us to go home with something from his Egypt. He loves the place so much. And that made me mad for a while. Because, I thought I was getting to Osmond. I was going to get away with the free papyrus. But in the end, he still got it to me somehow. And, it's very, very, very foolish of me to think that Osmond's love and his gifts would just run out. Because the thing about Osmond is, he's very, very, very honest. And his gifts come straight from the heart. And they're straight up the love of God. And how foolish of me to think that the love of God was going to run out. Very, very foolish. And so, of course, Osmond, very fittingly, ended up getting that papyrus to me. A little more in Egypt. We did a lot of other cool things. Like Moses' story really came to life here. Brief kind of overview, the Ben Hansen translation. Moses, was born, put in a basket, traveled down this huge river, and was picked up luckily by Pharaoh's daughter, brought in to live in the palace. Living in the palace, he learns all the ways of Egypt. He knows all of the important people living and all the important people being raised. And then he kills an Egyptian and flees the country. And now God tells him to go back to the same place. And, Moses really wasn't known for all that much when he was out of Egypt during that 40-year, 80-year time that he lived. But God comes to him in a burning bush, which is cool, and tells him to go back and speak with Pharaoh. And the strange part about this is Moses is supposed to go demand to Pharaoh, let my people go. When Moses, he knows whoever this Pharaoh is. They grew up together. It might have been Ramses II, might not have been. Whoever it is, Moses grew up with him. He knows this person pretty well. And he's going back to what used to be his family that he ran away from. And he's supposed to tell these things to his family. He's supposed to sternly say, hey, my God, who... Well, to them, it's the slave's God, so that doesn't make much sense. He's supposed to say, my God says, let the people go. And that's a very weird message to bring back to your family. Even Jesus had trouble going back to his hometown. I was very nervous about coming to speak in front of my hometown because a lot of you may know me as the kid that pooped in the nursery, or probably most of you know me as the reason that we had to redo the gym. Because all the holes in the ceiling, I promise half of them were mine. Very sorry about that. Half of the ladies that got hit with a basketball when they were chatting after class, that was me. Again, sorry about that. But that's probably what Moses really was remembered for, was his childhood and all these times. And I really did get the message when Meadowbrook decided to redo the gym the day I left for college. And that was kind of God at that point. And so Moses goes back, and he's supposed to talk to his Pharaoh, and he's going back to his hometown, and there are all these reasons why this just isn't going to work. And I can completely understand why Moses is saying, I'm very, very, very anxious. And I would be too. I'd be giving reasons why I shouldn't go. But Moses goes to the Temple of Luxor, which is the very top. And he goes to the area where children were schooled, which is on the left. And that's where men were schooled, those men and women. And so Pharaoh was probably there. And we were so privileged to go to the Temple of Luxor at sunset and walk through the temple and go sit in that very area. And a very interesting thing about Temple of Luxor is as you're walking in, there is a church with a mosque built on top of it. The church was covered up at some point in history, and the mosque was built on top, and then when they dug it all out, it was like, wow, it's a church, and so they had to let both stay. Really interesting blending of religions there. But so we get there, it's sunset, it's a beautiful night, cool air is rushing in, and there's something different about that temple from all the temples we visited. We visited a lot of temples, but there's something different about this one. As we're walking in, we hear Muslim calls of prayer at sunset all around. We see the green lights flashing, calling people in. And all these things are just kind of going on around us. But what we do is we go and we sit in that very area where Moses would have made that great stand with Pharaoh. And we just start singing. And it was, chill bumps for 30 straight minutes. It was incredible. But as we're singing, we see a man who's dressed in Muslim attire over the wall of the temple, like outside the temple. He comes and looks at us, and I look at him, and I'm like, oh, cool. And then he leaves. And then we keep singing. At this point, a crowd of 5 people is kind of around us, like, oh, wow, this is very cool, smiling, listening. And then the Muslim man that I saw over the wall comes up with another Muslim man. And they try to get Osman's attention and say, hey, come over here. And Osman, politely declines, and they leave again. And by this point, a crowd of 30 people is surrounding us and just kind of smiling and listening and taking pictures and videoing us singing. And at this point, the sun's going down, the lights are shining. It's incredible. And then the Muslim men come back, and they have a police officer. And the thing about police officers, especially in Egypt, they carry just assault rifles on straps. So they're really intimidating. And from playing Call of Duty, I know what gun he was using. It's a pretty cool gun in Call of Duty, which makes it all the more intimidating, of course. And so as we're singing, they get Osman, and we're thinking, oh my goodness, what do we do now? Do we stop singing, or do we I don't know. And so we keep singing. And after a while, Osman finishes with them. He comes back over, puts his arm around me, gives me a big smile, and keeps singing. And that was a moment that it's incredible. I don't have words for it. Just the praise and love in an area that's so incredibly Muslim and all kinds of persecution flying around, but it was still okay to smile and just sing along. And that was absolutely incredible. Now going back to Moses, so he's leading the Israelites out of the country, and all of a sudden the Egyptian army decides to follow him. Now, these were some really, really bad army men. I say that in a good way. They were very, very good army at this time. One of the reasons was because they had brand new technology, and it was the first chariot with metal wheels and 2 horses pulling it. And that is very, very, very intimidating. That's like the first person pulling a tank up onto the field of battle. You don't want to see that. And so the Israelites are, walking away, and they see that coming after them. And of course they're thinking, why did I just have to leave? I would much rather be a slave than to die by this way. This is awful. But of course, God just does what he does. He gets them out of trouble and saves them from certain doom. Another place we went was Mount Sinai, and we had a wake-up call at midnight and walked up the mountain and got to the top at 5 a.m. and sang some songs up there. That was incredible. The stars, I can't describe. But we finished, we start to walk down, and we hear some other voices from across the way, and we go over there, and there's a Malaysian group singing in Mandarin, and they're singing to the same God. And we think, that's very cool. And so they sing a song, we sing a song, and all of a sudden they say, do you know Silent Night? And we're like, of course. And so they're like, great, we do too, start it. And so we sing, and they sing in their language, singing the same song. It was a really great moment. And then a German man walks up, and he sings Silent Night in German. And I was thinking, wow, this is as close to biblical heaven as I've ever been. It was a very cool moment. But another thing about Egypt was there are 3 great kingdoms in ancient Egypt, and then 2 bad times in between. And the 2 bad times were because of the 2 troublemakers. And those troublemakers were actually Abraham and Joseph, who were spreading God. So I thought that was very cool how, in the past, someone has done that before. They've gone into Egypt and changed the place. So I feel like if someone's done it before, it can definitely be done again. I thought that was very, very good. So just a little bit on our influence. Obviously, Osmond came to know because of us singing everywhere we went. People had never, ever, ever heard singing like that before because it's just not around anywhere. And another thing about the kids we saw, kids everywhere wanted to play soccer. And that's totally up my alley, not really soccer, but as a kid, I wanted to play baseball all the time. In fact, I would go outside and play baseball every day, no matter if anyone was out there or not. And even if my mom told me stay inside, I would play baseball in the hall. And so I completely understand this spirit that these kids have, like, I want to play. And that was universal wherever we went. And that spirit, there's just something about it that gives me encouragement. Because that's a spirit that I know Christ loves. I know that God loves that spirit. And that spirit needs to hear about Jesus. And it just gives me hope that the gospel can reach anyone. And then there's another guy. His name is Joseph. He's right here. He's a very small guy. But he was our guide up Sinai. So he leads us up Sinai to the top. And he takes us back down. Not too uneventful. We had a couple girls get hurt. And they pushed through. This was very dramatic. It was a lot of fun to see. But Joseph, he is a guy who just has an incredible servant heart. It's phenomenal. And what he did a week earlier, he's telling us this story in broken English. And so he pointed at one of our guys and he said, 3 times the size of him she was. And he's talking about this woman who, she gets to the very top of Mount Sinai, very, very large woman, and just rolls her ankle and just cannot move. Well, of course, there's not an escalator. They're not just going to push you down the side. You have to get down somehow. So Joseph, going above and beyond his call of duty, takes the woman, puts her on his back, and walks down the 950 steps that are the last bits of Sinai. I don't know how he did it, but he did, and put her on a camel and got her down. It's incredible. That servant heart is going way beyond what anyone would do in that situation. And that's a heart that we were trying to tell him, that's from God. But for just whatever reason, he couldn't see that, that servant spirit comes from God. And so the last part I want to talk about is what I really get faith-wise from this trip. And with all due respect for the atheist friend we had last Wednesday about not wanting Christians to not go into friendships for the purpose of converting non-Christians, I can't bear to see someone go to hell. I just can't see that. I cannot look at someone and say, this person, they're nice, they're smiling, they're my friend, and they could be going to hell. I can't see that. I can't bear to see that. In fact, I was sitting in Broad Street this morning, and I was looking around, and I was like, if anyone in here would be going to hell, I can't bear to see that. Because they all look so nice and happy and smiling, and I just know that the Spirit of God's in them, and I want them to see that. And whether or not I'm going to press the matter on them, I don't want to, but I need to show you that you need to find Christ. And I think Paul puts it great in Romans 9 when he says that he would even take the place of people going to hell so that they could take his spot in heaven. And that's big time. That's huge sacrifice. And that's eternal sacrifice. That's incredible. And that's the sense of urgency that needs to be had. Because this is very big. This is not a small matter. That sense of urgency, it needs to be above every power in the universe, filled with the Holy Spirit to reach anyone around us every day. And a little confidence booster I have sometimes, if I ever wake up in the morning and I make mistakes all the time. I make big mistakes, I make small mistakes, I make just dumb mistakes, and it's easy to get down on yourself. But it's really cool to wake up in the morning and to think, you know what? God has shared the gospel with me. Someone has reached me with this message. And because this message has reached me, God has called me to carry that banner of faith today. He's called me to carry that banner today. That's pretty cool. And I know I make a lot of mistakes. I let people down sometimes. But every day that I wake up, if that's the thought that runs through my mind, that I'm supposed to carry the banner of faith today, that really brightens my spirits. That gives me a drive. That gives me a purpose. And I want everyone to see that. And I saw that one place was the Garden of Gethsemane. This is kind of winding down now. It was this very surreal moment. Those moments where you wonder, well, is God really even going to hear my prayer? Well, this was a moment that confirmed all of God's faithfulness to me. I was reading, we're sitting there reading, as you can see me here, reading through all the gospel accounts of Jesus' time in the garden, and just the agony and the pain that he felt, and just all this emotion just pouring out of God. And it's because this God, who is completely away from time, is not limited by time at all, he chose to become limited by time for us. And we see here in the garden his battle against time. And it's an incredible thought. It's an incredible battle. And the worst part about it is Jesus, he brings his trusted disciples with him. And what do his trusted disciples do? They fall asleep on him every time he walks around the corner. They provide no support whatsoever. In fact, they're the opposite of support. And so you would think that Jesus is completely left alone in the garden. But once you read the account of Luke, it says that an angel appeared to him in the garden and strengthened him. And as I'm reading these words, a song is playing in my headphones, and the lyrics say, "Wherever you are, roll over your stones. Look out to the stars, you're not alone. Come broken, come desperate and alone. Feel the healing, finally saving your soul. So if you're hopeless and love is stolen, if your heart is dying to sing, tonight you're heard by the King." Tonight you're heard by the King. And that was one of those moments that I'll remember forever, just how powerful that message really is. Tonight, God hears me. No matter what my prayer is, no matter how hard I stumble over my words, God still hears me. And that's definitely some ammunition I have when those little thoughts of the devil creep in the back of my mind. God's not there with you right now. This is one moment I can look back on and say, you're wrong. He's right there beside me. So our last thing we talk about, we have free travel. And free travel is at the end of the semester. We have 2 weeks to go wherever we want, which is very cool. And so we decide to hit 13 different cities and 9 or so different countries. And so, we have our plane, we get to Paris, we have our pass that gets us on a train, and we're ready to go. We get to Paris, and we get sent to the information booth. They send us to the wrong place. We get wrong information there, get sent to the wrong place again. And all of a sudden, everyone is telling us the wrong things. So much to the point that, we don't like Paris at all anymore. And we're tired of free travel, and it is not even halfway through the first day. And it gets to the point where we were supposed to go to Amsterdam, and we had a hostel booked for that night, and we're going to stay in Amsterdam. And the lady says, the train to Amsterdam is sold out. And we say, okay, well, can we get there in an indirect route? She says, yes, you can, but it would be very hard. We're like, okay. She's like, you can't do it. And we're thinking, and we're wondering what's going on, and she's like, go to the information desk. We're like, okay, thank you. We go over there, they say, oh yeah, you can book, just go ahead and go right back over there. And when we go back over there, they say, all the trains are gone, sorry. And so we're we're very heartbroken at this moment. But, of course, adventurous spirit is going to push us through. And so we say, guys, no Amsterdam, but we're in Paris. Come on, let's go explore Paris. So we go, we're carrying our huge bags, and we say, all right, we need to find a locker to put them in. We start looking around. The cheapest locker for 4 hours is $20. And we're all thinking, that's a stretch. And so then we go, we're like, well, let's go see how much a ticket into the town would be. It's $15. And we're like, no, we're not doing that. I refuse. And so we just decide, all right, we'll sleep in the Paris airport tonight and just skip that city and move on to the next one the next day. Hopefully, if that train's not sold out or if we can't get there. And all these thoughts of just awful things are running through our mind. We're all saying, I want to go home right now. I don't even want to see Europe for 2 weeks. And it sounds ridiculous, but the moment is totally right. It's a good thought. And so we're thinking, Paris is horrible. I hate this place. And so we decided to just sleep in the corner for an hour. And when I wake up, the realization hits me that Harding University in Greece, also known as Hug, is over. And it hurts. Because these 33 students that now are like family to me, I won't see them again every day. The host family that's over there, won't see them again every day. The other families over there, I won't see them again every day. And it's just all these horrible things are happening. And, I decided, all right, let me listen to my music and, get on with this. And I listen to the music and a message gets sent to me. All this Christian music just keeps on blaring and blaring and blaring. And I started to realize what's going on here. I'd been praying that God would cut down the safety net that I'd put up in between me and him. And I'd put a barrier in between him, and if I have that barrier, I can't do his work. So I said, God, whatever it takes, knock that barrier down. Well, this was my answered prayer. It was sitting and sleeping 2 nights in a Paris airport. And it was awful, but you know what? We got through it. And it's because we prayed every day for our daily bread. And that's exactly what God provided for us. No matter what happened, God provided for us. And so, some say it'd be all downhill from here. I don't really know if I'm going to start out with a better story than, as I was sitting on my camel walking along the Nile River, or as I was eating my swordfish looking out on the Cinque Terre sunset. I can't really top those stories, but my title was The Journey Starting a Lifetime instead of The Journey of a Lifetime. And I think this journey, more than anything, has opened my eyes to the problems all over the world because people aren't acting out and showing their faith. And overall, what this trip showed me, more than anything else, is that I need to be that guy that shows my faith. Because that is something that's very much needed in this world. And the reason that I can say Hug is not over is because the purpose of Hug was to learn about my faith. And learning about my faith does not stop when I come back from Greece. It's something that continues to go on. And I can still have those crazy experiences that Paul had of trusting. And God will lead me wherever he needs to lead me. So.
Before we get out of here, I know we're a little bit over time, but what are you going to be up to this summer?
I'll be working at Harding, so.
Going back to Cersei. We're not going to see much of you, are we?
Not too much.
Okay. Well, thank you, and let's just have a prayer.